Anyone still holding out on the possibility of Half-Life 3 seeing the light of day has been dealt a substantial punch right into the kidney. Mark Laidlaw, Valve's head writer for Half-Life, Half-Life 2, and its episodes, has left Valve to retire from game development. While it's certain he might have already written Half-Life 3 before his departure, having such an important member of Valve does not bode well at all for the masses tentatively waiting for Half-Life 3 to be announced. But for all we know, and as little as Valve likes to say, Half-Life 3 may already have been completed, just unreleased. Valve does have a history of delayed releases. In the case of the original Half-Life, Valve decided to perform a complete teardown and rebuild. They delayed its release by a year because they were not at all satisfied. The rest is PC gaming history. Valve these days is also incredibly secretive, and why shouldn't they be? They have arguably become the most important entity in the PC gaming world. So let's perform a fun creative exercise. Valve is a busy company with numerous projects in the pipeline. What if Valve was to hand over the reins of Half-Life 3 development to another studio outside of Valve? Some of you are thinking, for God's sakes, you're crazy if Lord Gaben doesn't develop and produce it himself. Sensibly, he and other Valve heads could produce and or oversee another studio outside of Valve, contracted to complete the game. Such a move would be sensible if Valve has already finished the story, storyboards, engine, general game design, etc., etc. However, outsourcing Half-Life 3 to another studio could be an incredibly intriguing proposition if Valve was to allow considerable creative license, in a way, a guest studio. Certain styles or concepts that Valve might not have ever considered could be introduced, while faithfully respecting what Valve has created in its previous Half-Life titles. What studio would you propose to handle such an important and monumental task? Who would you have faith in delivering the next chapter of the Half-Life universe? Crytek? No, they take themselves way too seriously, and it comes off as, well, silly. They may be technical juggernauts, but after the last two Crysis games, I've lost faith in their creative abilities. Epic? Expect lots of over-the-top gore, curb-stomping, muscle-bound dudes with chunky armor. Narrative and character interaction aren't exactly their expertise. Irrational Games? They actually make some sense, except Irrational Games has been closed down since 2014. I can go on, but there is one studio that sticks out in my mind, and that's because every time I play one of their games, it instantly makes me think that they have, in a way, created a spiritual successor to Half-Life. And when I say a spiritual successor, what I really mean is that this studio, in only 2 games, has created such a rich atmosphere and narrative that I believe has surpassed anything made by Valve. The player is sucked into the story with just enough information given to the player, but left with so many questions, much like Half-Life 2. It's in a way akin to a spiritual journey, as the faceless character of these 2 games must accept his role in the perilous surroundings of his natural, yet unnatural world, which includes respecting and accepting his social role to the people around him as he tries to complete his task. NPCs are as realistic as they come. Each person is meticulously placed, created, and voiced to make it feel as though each one embodies its own soul and place in the world. Graphically, these games are top-notch. The developer has used its graphical mastery to create dreary, desolate, yet detailed and characteristic environments that beg one to look at the micro as well as the macro details. So much is familiar, especially to one of Eastern European extraction, yet so different because of the consequences of what happened before in the events preceding the setting in these 2 games. What is detracting about these 2 games is that they do not embody the same kind of physicalized world and semi-open level designs seen so much in Half-Life 2, nor the creative puzzles and physicalized gameplay. However, the environments are still very interactive, and for incredibly linear games, I think they do what they do well. The FPS gunplay in the second title in particular is very well polished though. And I'm talking about the titles Metro 2033 and Metro Last Light, the studio being 4A Games. I know plenty of you are thinking, Blitz, you've gone off the deep end. Why would you even consider having someone other than Valve complete what would be Valve's magnum opus? Well, until Valve releases Half-Life 3, we will never know what it's like, how good it is, if it's another revolutionary step in gaming, or whatever. We don't know what the state of development Half-Life 3 is in currently. Valve is a very interesting company in the way it's ran. The command and control hierarchy, normally seen with multi-billion-dollar companies, is really just non-existent. It's essentially very libertarian. Different ideas and opinions are not seen as dissent, they are welcomed. If an idea ends in failure, it's seen as a learning experience. Letting another company handle their IP isn't exactly new in the gaming world. Valve has done this before with some of its expansion installments in the Half-Life universe, like Blue Shift and Opposing Force. There was even a Half-Life 2 episode being helmed by an outside studio until it was cancelled. However, given the creative license to take Valve's material and proverbially run with it, 4A Games could use their expertise and imagination in creating environments, atmosphere, characters, and NPC interaction to create a more intimate environment that begs the player to look more closely at what they are and what is really contained within it. Couple that with the traditional Half-Life 2 derived physicalized gameplay and smart puzzles that make sense in the context of the world, and you'd be taking the Half-Life franchise into a new logical direction without alienating fans of the older games. It's very likely that 4A has taken quite a bit of inspiration from the Half-Life games, much like they have from existential Soviet and Russian literature, including the book that Metro 2033 is based on. A large part of 4A Games' staff were part of the Ukrainian developer GSC Game World, known for creating the Stalker series of games. The first game in particular is sort of based on Andrei Tarkovsky's Russian movie of the same name, that itself is sort of based on the Russian book Roadside Picnic. Don't ask me what I think of it, I've never read it. Half-Life, while not focused on existentialism, does try to encourage players to look outward from the basic game story and ask questions. The game does tease you with details about the world and makes you wonder about the G-Man, for example. There are numerous theories, of course, as to who or even what he is. The focus is the present and a positive future is the goal. The past, while important, is not why you continue. It's the future possibilities and desires that move you forward. Metro 2033 was a journey of mission and purpose, while Metro Last Light was a journey of redemption. For the player, each game is about survival, exploration, and discovery. Half-Life 2 pales in comparison to this, and even more so in terms of the numbers of factions and peoples that exist within the Metro universe. The relationships between each faction and even the people within the factions can be very antagonistic as well as symbiotic on different levels. 4A did a great job keeping the player intrigued and guessing plot-wise. The Metro games are not the best games ever made, but so much of what they do is done excellently, making them incredibly worthy of one's time. 4A Games, being majorly involved with the creation of the next chapter in Half-Life, would be bringing together two intellectual powerhouses that combined might give us the best Half-Life title that we may not have ever expected. Such a combination of narrative, gameplay, atmosphere, and execution can encourage its player to think outside of what is being represented or told, and it's at this point that a game truly can enter the realm of art, as well as being plain old interactive entertainment. I hope you, the viewer, enjoyed this, and I hope you see the possibilities of having another studio lend their vision to the established Half-Life universe as we know it. It's highly unlikely this scenario would ever happen, but it doesn't hurt to imagine and dream.